The alien swamp breathed. Its pulse was low, slow, and steady, like a sleeping beast beneath the soil. The mist clung to the tree roots, thick and luminous, veiling everything in pale green vapor. Strange, whispering chimes echoed through the vine-choked canopy, natural wind organs grown from hollowed branches. Beneath them, puddles shimmered with bioluminescence, oily and deep, reflecting light from creatures that darted just under the surface. The air was humid and sweet with the scent of overripe fruit, moss, and something else, something like copper and decay. Draven didn't belong here. He stood knee-deep in the spongy peat, alone in a place no one else dared enter without escort, and for good reason. Valura 9 was beautiful, but it didn't care who lived or died. The planet had a wildness that watched you from the shadows. It wasn't hostile exactly, but it remembered. Draven adjusted his pack, wiping condensation from the lens of his scanner. Specimen 405, unusual color change at base, possibly linked to root hormone imbalance. He spoke softly into the recorder, though no one would listen to it but him. Field data was a formality now, ever since Command had shut down direct research on Valari-adjacent zones. Too risky, they said. Too sensitive. A truce, thin as breath, held between humans and the native Valari. But it wasn't peace. Not really. And that's when he heard it. A sound tore across the swamp like glass shattering underwater. A scream, high and raw and not remotely human. It rang with desperation, not like language, but like the soul's last cry before it breaks. Draven froze, his breath caught in his chest. The scream came again, higher, sharper, fractured, a mother's cry. He turned toward the source instinctively, his muscles already tensing to move, but his mind lagged behind. The standing orders rose like static in his head. Do not interfere with Valari. No unsanctioned contact, no exceptions. And yet, he started running. The water splashed around his legs as he pushed through the undergrowth, ignoring the tangle of reeds and low, thorny branches that clawed at his clothes. Wet leaves slapped against his face. His boots sank deeper with every step. Another scream echoed, closer now. And then a second, weaker sound followed it. Smaller, choked, a child. Draven broke into the clearing like an intruder into a sacred space. What he saw struck him harder than the cries ever could. A child, green-skinned, small, his short black hair plastered with wet mud, was half submerged in a bubbling patch of black mire. His little arms thrashed weakly, each movement only pulling him deeper into the quick muck. Panic shimmered in his wide golden eyes as thick sludge crept up his chest. Just a few feet away, a tall, striking figure crouched on her knees, clawing at the edge of the bog with bare hands. Her skin was a deep, iridescent green, her long black hair plastered to her face, soaked in swamp water and grief. Bioluminescent tendrils wove through her hair, fluttering with erratic pulses of color, blood red, then white hot, then a sickened gray. Her arms were already sunk to the elbows in the muck, trying to reach her son. She didn't even notice Draven at first. He took a step forward, and she snapped around, eyes locking on him with a ferocity that made him freeze. Her gaze was not just defensive, it was terrified. She stared at him like she expected him to finish what the swamp had started. Draven raised his hands. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, voice low, steady. She didn't answer, just let out another wordless cry. Her son had slipped further. Draven moved. He didn't wait for permission. He dropped beside her in the mud, his knees sinking instantly. She flinched back, tendrils flaring white, but didn't stop him. "I've got him," he said. "We can do this together." He reached into the swamp and felt for the boy's arms. The child whimpered, weakly reaching toward him. "I want to go home," the boy whispered, so softly Draven barely caught it. The mother gripped Draven's arm suddenly, not to stop him, but to brace him. Her fingers were long, strong, trembling with fear. Her grip was a plea. Together they pulled. The mud fought them like something alive, slurping and resisting with a foul suction that stank of rot. Draven's muscles screamed, and for a moment, he thought they were too late. Then the child came loose all at once, coated in filth, gasping and coughing. Draven dragged him free and cradled him against his chest for a heartbeat before placing him into his mother's waiting arms. She wrapped herself around her son, cradling him like glass. Her body shuddered with each breath she took. The child buried his face in her shoulder, sobbing quietly. Draven backed away, chest heaving. He sat in the mud, not caring that it soaked through his clothes. His arms were shaking, his mind wasn't. What he had just done would have consequences. He looked at the woman again. Her eyes were on him, still guarded but no longer afraid. Her expression was unreadable. She hadn't spoken a word. She hadn't needed to, but her silence said everything. You helped me. You broke the rules for us. Why? Draven didn't know the answer himself. He watched as she checked her son for injuries, her fingers moving with care. The child sniffled, then looked up at Draven with wide eyes. Are you one of the bad humans? The boy asked quietly. Draven blinked. No, he said, unsure if he believed it. The child tilted his head. Mama says they don't come into the swamp. She says they forget we live here. Draven glanced at the woman. She said nothing, but something flickered across her face. Shame? Anger? The boy blinked slowly, then whispered, You didn't forget. No, Draven replied. I didn't. They sat in silence, surrounded by the soft glow of swamp lights and the distant clicking of creatures beneath the surface. He should have called it in, should have used the comm strapped to his belt to report what happened. But he didn't, because something in her eyes, deep green, glassy with unshed tears, asked him not to, not with words, with trust. She stood at last, still holding her child. Her body was tense, her tendrils brushing the boy's back in a soothing rhythm. Then slowly, she turned. Draven watched them disappear into the mist. He didn't follow, but something inside him had already started moving. He remained there long after they were gone, sitting in the cold, glowing mud with 100 thoughts colliding behind his eyes, and only one that mattered. What have I just done? Draven didn't sleep that night. The swamp's silence haunted him, not because it was empty, but because it wasn't. Every rustle of vine, every pulse of unseen light beyond the canopy reminded him of what he'd done, that he had broken protocol, crossed a line, touched a Valari with bare hands, and seen something in her eyes that no textbook or mission directive had ever prepared him for. Back at his greenhouse lab on the edge of the forest, the air felt heavier than it had in months. His equipment hummed softly, thermal monitors, nutrient testers, motion sensors all blinking in rhythm. But the rhythm felt artificial now, mechanical, lifeless. The wild had changed him in just one night. He found himself staring at the dried mud on his boots longer than necessary, watching how the greenish residue glinted under the sterilized lights. Swamp clay, thicker than it should be, and buried in it, one faint thread of glowing tendril. He didn't clean it off. Instead, he sat at his desk, recording his thoughts into the data log, not the official one, but his personal archive, the one command didn't know about. I helped a Valari woman today, and her child, a boy, maybe 5 years old in human terms. Nearly drowned in a bog near Outpost 3, I pulled him out. She didn't speak, not once, but she let me touch her. That alone would be enough to get me dismissed. He paused, then exhaled slowly. But I'd do it again. The next morning came with a soft rain, so thin it barely made a sound. Draven woke from a restless doze to the scent of damp soil and blooming spores. He stood, stretched, and opened the greenhouse doors. A wall of mist greeted him, thick and full of shifting color. He didn't expect to see them again, but they came. At first, it was just the sound. The faint squelch of feet in mud, the brush of leaves being parted. Then he saw her silhouette emerge through the fog. The Valari woman, tall and poised, her green skin painted with rain, bioluminescent strands in her long black hair softly pulsing in hues of pale gold and seafoam green. She was no longer frantic. Her presence was deliberate, almost defiant. Behind her, clinging to her side, was the boy. His face lit up the moment he spotted Draven. You live in a plant, he said, pointing at the greenhouse with wide, curious eyes. Are you a tree? Draven blinked. Number just someone who talks to them. The boy laughed, an airy, bright sound that seemed to make even the swamp lights shimmer a little more brightly. Trees talk? Some do, Draven replied, crouching to his level. But only if you listen really well. The woman stayed quiet, standing just outside the perimeter of the greenhouse, her eyes sharp but no longer hostile. She looked around as if studying the place, its vines, its unfamiliar angles, the way living roots had been encouraged to wrap around the glass walls like an offering. I didn't think I'd see you again, Draven said, directing the words gently toward her. She finally spoke. Her voice was soft but clear. I didn't think I'd want to. That silence between them held weight, acknowledgement, maybe even a hint of apology. But more than anything, it was filled with unspoken questions. The boy broke the tension. "Mama says I have to say thank you," he said, stepping forward with both hands behind his back. "So, thank you." Draven smiled. "You're welcome." The boy hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "Can I see your talking trees?" Draven looked to the woman for permission. She gave the faintest nod. Inside the greenhouse, Norai darted from one glowing pod to another, wide-eyed and full of wonder. "This one smells like candy," he announced, sticking his nose into a large yellow bloom. "But this one smells like feet." Draven laughed. "That's how it defends itself. A smell no one wants to get close to." The woman stepped inside slowly, keeping a cautious distance from the equipment, but scanning the space with intelligent eyes. "You grow earth things here?" she asked. "Some. Others are local. I'm trying to see what grows when the two worlds meet." She didn't smile, but the look she gave him wasn't cold. "You're not like the others." "I didn't come here to strip mine a planet, just to listen," Draven said. "But they don't listen back. Not really." Her eyes softened just a little. Nori touched a red vine that shivered at his fingertips. "Does this one like me?" "It does now," Draven said. The boy turned to his mother. "Can we stay a little longer? I like the tree man." She said nothing, but her expression faltered just for a second. A flicker of something ancient and tired passed over her face. Then she nodded. Draven busied himself, showing Norai how to gently stroke the sensory petals of a bioluminescent fern. He moved slowly, respectfully, always letting the child lead. The woman watched them without interrupting, arms folded, her stance firm but no longer hostile. "I never got your name," Draven said eventually, glancing at her. She hesitated, then said, "Shy." Her voice sounded different when she said it, like the name held more than just syllables. Maybe a story, maybe 1,000. "I'm Draven." "I know," she said. "Your scent was in the swamp before I saw you." Draven blinked. "You could smell me?" She gave the faintest smirk. "You smell like the trees and fear." "Well," he said, smiling faintly, "that's not entirely inaccurate." Shai turned her gaze toward the glass ceiling, watching the mist curl across it like lazy smoke. "Why did you help me?" Draven paused. He could have given a dozen logical reasons. Duty, human ethics, science. But none of those were true. "Because no one else did." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "They don't hear our songs. Not anymore." He didn't understand the full meaning of her words, but he understood the pain beneath them. "I want to," he said softly. Shai looked at him, eyes steady, not warm, but no longer distant. "Then you'll need to unlearn your world." Norai interrupted the moment by tugging on Draven's sleeve. "Draven, do you have flying bugs here?" "Not bitey ones, just the glowing kind." Draven knelt beside him and opened a small drawer from the lab table. Inside were 3 glowing insects in a sealed habitat. "Only if you promise to be gentle." "I'm always gentle," the boy declared, immediately jabbing a finger into the glass. The bugs fluttered away in a panic. He looked up sheepishly. "Except that one time, but I was learning." Draven laughed. Shai didn't, but her expression eased. Eventually the sky outside shifted color. Shai straightened. "We should go," Nori pouted. "But I didn't even name the bugs yet." "You can come back," Draven said before he could stop himself. Shai didn't answer, but she didn't refuse either. As they left, the boy waved enthusiastically. "Bye, tree man." Draven stood at the door of the greenhouse, watching them disappear into the mist once more. But this time, something had changed. This time, he knew they'd return. And deep in his chest, something unfamiliar stirred. Something heavier than curiosity. Not love, not yet, but hope. And the distant sense that his decision, simple as it had seemed, had just shifted something far bigger than he understood. The mist had thickened overnight, pooling in waves across the forest floor like spilled milk laced with light. Shai and Norai had vanished into it hours ago, their silhouettes swallowed by glowing vines and whispering trees. But they had left something behind in Draven, a question that wouldn't stop growing. He hadn't meant to get involved. He hadn't planned to open the doors of his sanctuary to anyone, least of all a Valari woman and her curious child. But the swamp had plans of its own, and now those plans were beginning to root in him like one of the symbiotic vines clinging to his greenhouse walls. He found himself cleaning, not out of necessity, but anticipation. The lab was already spotless, But he moved through it again, checking nutrient levels, recalibrating humidity controls, pruning overgrown fungi that glowed too brightly near the moss beds. His hands were steady, but his thoughts weren't. They'd said goodbye yesterday with no promises, no assurances they'd return. And yet, by midday, he caught himself glancing at the tree line more than he should have. Every time a shadow stirred in the mist, he turned too quickly, only to see a bird shape or the rippling bulk of a swamp stalker slithering between roots. The waiting gnawed at him more than he wanted to admit. When the mist finally parted, they weren't walking. They were dancing. Or rather, Norai was. The boy came bounding into the clearing barefoot, arms flailing with joy, mud splattering up his legs as he skidded across the wet ground with a whooping laugh. "Draven! Draven! Look! I made the ground sing!" Draven stepped out of the greenhouse just as Norai stomped on a hidden patch of ground that released a sudden musical vibration, one of the swamp's biotic resonance fields, a phenomenon still poorly understood. The boy giggled and jumped again. "It goes whoomp if you hit it just right." Shai followed a few paces behind him, walking as always with quiet grace, though her sharp eyes swept the area with practiced wariness. She hadn't relaxed yet, not fully. But she was here, that meant something. Draven smiled despite himself. "You've discovered the natural percussion system of Valura 9. Norai squinted at him. "Did I break it?" "Number you played it." The boy gave a delighted gasp. "Then I'm a music maker." Shai approached slowly, her long black hair tied back today with a thin strand of woven vine that shimmered faintly with golden dust. She wore a wrap dyed in subtle shades of green and charcoal, blending into the swamp's palette like she was born from it. "I didn't think he'd remember the way," she said without greeting. Draven arched an eyebrow. "You let him lead?" "I watched. I suppose that's how trust works." She didn't respond to that, but the twitch at the corner of her mouth said she noticed the tone. "Today," Norai announced, climbing the steps into the greenhouse, "I want to name everything." Draven followed him in, glancing back once at Shai. She hesitated outside the threshold before stepping in. A small gesture, but one that meant something. Inside, the greenhouse shimmered with life. The ambient light filters had adjusted to the shifting sun outside, bathing the space in a warm green glow. Norai darted between planters and hover trays, his eyes wide with wonder. "What's this one called?" he asked, pointing at a spiraling vine with bright blue thorns. "Earth name or Valari name?" Draven asked. The boy blinked. "It has both?" "Everything has more than one name," Shai said softly. "Some are just quieter." Norai paused, clearly thinking this over. Then, "I want to call it Jumpy Bite." "That's actually accurate," Draven said. "It twitches when touched and stings if threatened." "See?" Norai puffed his chest. "Told you I'm a name maker, too." Shai wandered to the back of the greenhouse, pausing near a series of suspended crystal pods filled with hybrid fungal spores. She ran a hand lightly over the glass, leaving faint heat traces where her skin met the surface. "You've made this place grow well," she said. "It's half listening," Draven replied. "The rest is guesswork." She turned to look at him. "That's more than most give us." Draven stepped beside her. "Most of the others see this planet as raw material, a place to harvest, not to learn from." Shai studied his face. "Then why are you here?" He hesitated. The question had an easy answer, one he'd repeated in every performance review and security check. But this time he didn't say it. "Because I didn't want to be where I was," he finally said. "And this place, it doesn't ask questions. It just is." Shai nodded slowly. "Valura accepts what survives, not always what's worthy." Norai had climbed up onto the edge of the growing platform and was now dangling one leg over, inspecting a bioluminescent root cluster below. "Mama, do you think bugs feel sad when they can't glow anymore?" Shai blinked, startled. "What makes you think that?" "This one stopped glowing when I touched it." Draven stepped forward. "That just means it's resting. Sometimes things stop shining when they're tired." "Like you," the boy said, peering at Draven. "You shine different than the others, but quiet." Shai looked at Draven then, really looked. "You've been hurt," she said, not as a question. Draven said nothing. Shai walked slowly to the far side of the room where a collection of Earth-native plants grew in glass pods. Most were non-threatening, herbs, roots, edible mosses, but one was in bloom. a fragile white flower with curling petals and a translucent stem. Shai leaned in and exhaled a soft breath across its surface. To Draven's astonishment, the petals shifted in response. "It remembers sound," she murmured, "not just vibrations." "That's impossible," he said. "It's Earth native, not bioengineered." "Even alien things learn," she said. "Even invaders." He bristled slightly at the word. "Is that what you think I am?" Shai turned back to him, face unreadable. "I think you are what you choose next." Noré had found a reflective surface near the moisture condenser and was making faces into it. "Draven, do you think my hair will grow down to my feet like Mama's?" Draven laughed. "It might, but you'll have to be very patient," Noré scowled. "I'm bad at waiting." Draven knelt beside him. "It's okay to be bad at things when you're young. That's how we get better." The boy tilted his head. "Were you bad at saving people once?" The question hit harder than expected. "I was," Draven said after a long pause. "Very bad. But you saved me. I was ready this time." Noré nodded seriously, then reached out and hugged him. Draven froze. It was the kind of hug children give when no one's watching, honest, without calculation. The boy's small green arms wrapped around his neck with total trust. When he finally let go, he whispered, "You smell like swamp and tea." Draven smiled. "That's how I know it's working." Shai stood near the entrance, her eyes on them both, silent again. This time the silence wasn't distrust. It was something deeper, a recognition, a quiet ache. "I want to show you something tomorrow," she said. Draven stood, gently brushing dirt from his sleeves. "What is it?" "A place the songs remember." "You trust me that much?" "I'm not sure," she replied, "but Noré does." The boy was already curled into a moss seat near the root bed, eyelids drooping. "If we bring him," he mumbled, "maybe the swamp will stop being lonely." Shai looked at Draven, and though she didn't smile, something in her features softened. "Be ready," she said. Then they left, disappearing into the mist again, hand in hand, light trailing off their skin. And for the first time since he'd arrived on Valora 9, Draven didn't watch them go with a scientist's eye or a stranger's detachment. He watched with something closer to longing, not for love, not yet, but for the chance to finally matter to someone again. The path was narrower today, not physically, though the twisting roots and mist-laced hollows were tighter here than before, but emotionally. The air felt heavier, charged, as if the swamp knew this wasn't just a visit. Something deeper was coming. Draven walked carefully behind Shai as she led them through the marsh, stepping from dry patch to dry patch with an effortless grace that made him feel clumsy by comparison. The child, Noré, skipped ahead, humming softly to himself, leaving little footprints in the shimmering moss. The air smelled of rain and minerals, thick with the scent of blooming fungal vines. The glow from the canopy flickered, as if the trees were breathing in sync with them. "Where are we going today?" Draven asked, more to ease the silence than out of impatience. Shai didn't look back. "To a place where I can speak, not with words, not only." "You can speak here," he said. "Not like this." They walked for another stretch in silence, their feet sinking into the soft, warm earth with each step. The swamp pulsed around them, alive, aware. Draven could feel it more now, as if being around Shai and Noré had opened some inner sense he hadn't known existed. Noré suddenly stopped and pointed to a tree that had cracked open at the base, revealing glowing red roots beneath. "That one's bleeding," he said with a mix of curiosity and alarm. Shai knelt beside him. "Not bleeding? Remember what I told you?" The boy nodded. "It's singing with its roots." "Exactly," she said softly. "Even when something's hurt, it still sings." Draven crouched next to them, his eyes on the raw, glowing wound in the tree. "Why does it glow like that?" Shai looked at him over her shoulder. "Pain leaves a mark. Some kinds never fade." There was something in her tone that made him look at her more closely. When they reached the edge of a large, water-laced basin surrounded by tall, stone-like stalks, Shai finally stopped. The clearing was strange, almost too quiet. The air hummed faintly with pressure. The moss glowed in a spiral pattern, leading toward the center where a large tree stood, taller than any he'd seen on the planet, its roots woven into arches and its trunk carved with what looked like ancient symbols. "This is where we come to grieve," she said. Draven stepped slowly toward the center, instinctively aware that this was sacred. The tree towered over them all, but not in a threatening way, It felt like standing inside a memory. Sha'ai remained by the edge, one hand resting on her son's shoulder. "He's buried here," she said quietly. Draven froze. "Your mate?" She nodded once. "I'm sorry," he said, but the words felt small. "I sang him into the roots," she said. "It was the only thing I had left to give." Draven stepped back. "How did it happen?" She didn't answer right away. Noré sat down on the soft moss and began tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick, his humming low and distracted, as if he'd heard this story before but never wanted to. "It was a mining collapse," she finally said, "just outside Zone 7. The humans had pushed deeper than they were supposed to. They ignored the fault lines. We told them. They didn't listen." Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "He went to help pull out one of yours," she continued. "Didn't make it out." Draven swallowed hard. Did they honor him?" "They denied it happened." He looked away. "Of course they did. We were told to leave. No compensation, no justice, just silence." Draven sat down beside her on the moss carefully. "And the others?" "Your people?" Shai's eyes darkened. "They turned away too. Valari aren't meant to cling, not even in grief. The elders told me I was too human now, too loud, too broken." "Because you mourned your mate?" "Because I couldn't pretend he hadn't existed." The silence wrapped around them like the mist. Draven looked at her, truly seeing her now, not just as an alien mother or a cultural mystery, but as a woman who had survived isolation from every side. "You were alone," he said. Sha'ai nodded. "Until he came." She looked down at Norai, who was now lying on his stomach, chin resting in his hands, still tracing the spiral grooves of the earth. Draven turned to Norai. "You're stronger than you look, little one." The boy shrugged. "I don't want to be strong. I just want Mama to smile again." Shai's breath caught, not dramatically, just barely audible, but Draven heard it. "Have you smiled since then?" he asked her. "Not like before." He hesitated. "You smiled the other day when he was naming bugs." Shai looked at him. "You noticed?" He nodded. "How could I not?" The tree behind them gave a faint groan, wood shifting under weight, or perhaps age, but it felt like something else, like acknowledgement. "You talk to the swamp as if it listens," Draven said. "It does. Even to me?" Shai looked at him a long time. "Not yet, but it's curious." Draven leaned back on his hands, watching the way the light filtered through the arching roots overhead. "I came here to disappear," he admitted. Shai didn't interrupt. "I didn't kill anyone. Nothing dramatic. Just let something happen when I shouldn't have. One mistake. One that mattered. I couldn't face the ones I let down. So I ran here." "And the trees welcomed you?" "Number they tolerated me. Until now." He looked at her. "You're the first person who's made me feel seen since I left Earth." Shai tilted her head just slightly. "That's a dangerous thing to say to someone you're not supposed to talk to." "I've broken bigger rules." Noré crawled over and plopped himself in Draven's lap without warning. "I'm tired. Your lap is squishy." Draven blinked, then chuckled. "It's not that squishy." Shai raised an eyebrow. "You wear armor like your kind, but you've never really worn it." Draven smoothed Noré's hair. "Maybe I lost it along the way." She didn't reply, but she sat down beside him, not touching, just near, a closeness that wasn't casual but wasn't forced either. "Mama?" Noré mumbled, already half asleep. "Yes, love?" "Can he stay?" Shai's gaze met Draven's. This time she didn't look away. "If he chooses to." Draven felt the moss breathe beneath him. Or maybe it was just his heart. He looked between them. The grieving mother, the child who still believed in music, and the tree that remembered every voice. "I choose to," he said. No ceremony, no promises, but it was real. And in that sacred silence, Valura 9 recorded something new. There was a weight in the air that morning, so subtle it might have been mistaken for fog. But Draven knew better. It wasn't just mist or moisture pressing against his skin. It was the shape of something approaching, something unseen and unwelcome. He felt it before he saw it, before the rustle in the underbrush, before the stillness of the birds. The swamp knew. He stood at the edge of the greenhouse, running a hand over the frame where vines had started to curl into the structure, as if claiming it. The glass was warm from the rising sun, and condensation glimmered like scattered stars across its surface. But his thoughts were elsewhere. on Sha'ai's words from the night before. They're watching again. The Valari had always known how to sense it, how to read the wind and the soil like it was scripture. She'd warned him in that low, even tone she used when the stakes were real. We need to be careful. They're walking closer than they say. He hadn't wanted to believe it, but now, standing in the half-light, he felt it too, a shift, a presence. He turned just in time to see Sha'ai appear through the tree line, with Norai clutching her hand, holding something carefully wrapped in moss. They moved quietly, but not with fear. More like they were walking into something inevitable. Draven stepped toward them. "I thought maybe you'd stay away today," he said. Sha'ai shook her head. "If we hide, they win." She looked tired, not weak but worn. The kind of weariness that doesn't just live in the body, but in the memory. Her bioluminescent tendrils were dimmer than usual, their color muted to a cool gray-blue. Even Norai's usual bounce seemed dampened, his eyes fixed on the moss bundle in his hands. "What's that?" Draven asked gently. The boy held it up without a word. Draven crouched and slowly peeled the moss apart. Inside was a flower, one of the rare swamp blooms that only opened after a storm. Its petals shimmered with a deep iridescent hue, pulsing faintly. "I found it near the water," Norai said softly. "It was closed when I touched it. Then it opened for me." He looked up. "I think it's brave." Draven smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Then it's like you." The boy tilted his head. "Am I brave? Even when I don't feel brave?" Draven met his gaze. "That's when it matters most." Norai nodded slowly. Then, as if recalling something important, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a smooth, dark stone. "I brought this for you," he said. Draven accepted it without question. "What is it?" "It's for when your voice shakes." Sha'ai watched silently as Draven turned the stone over in his hand. It was warm, rounded at the edges. It had clearly been held many times. "It keeps the scared parts quiet," Norai said. "Not gone, just quiet." Draven swallowed the sudden lump in his throat. "Thank you." Norai stepped back, satisfied. Sha'ai finally spoke. "They'll come soon, won't they?" Draven nodded. "I got a ping this morning. A short-range scout. They were in Sector 9 at dawn." "Too close," she murmured. "I can't stop them, but I can stand in front of them." Sha'ai looked at him for a long moment. "You'd do that for us." "I'd do it for you." She said nothing, but in the stillness, something passed between them. Not quite spoken, not quite hidden. A mutual knowing, a shared defiance, and then the woods stirred, not a rustle of wildlife. Footsteps, mechanical, measured, human. Draven turned, squinting toward the sound. Two figures emerged from the mist, Lieutenant Harrow, and a younger officer trailing behind him, Private Tallow, if Draven remembered correctly. Still green, still unsure. His stance betrayed his discomfort. Harrow walked like the ground belonged to him. His boots pressed deep into the moss with every step, his rifle slung across his back like a badge of authority. His helmet was off, but his expression was no less guarded. "Dr. Ward," Harrow called. "We've been looking for you." Draven stood his ground. "I'm where I always am." Harrow's eyes scanned the clearing, too long, too deliberately. They landed on Sha'ai, then on Norai, then back to Draven. Unusual company for a botanist. "I study the ecosystem. They're part of it." Harrow's mouth tightened. "Don't play games." Draven said nothing. Tallow shifted nervously, eyes flicking between them. Harrow stepped forward, eyes locked on Sha'ai. "You're not supposed to be here." Sha'ai didn't move. Her chin lifted, her tendrils flashing pale silver. "And yet here I am." Harrow turned to Draven. "You've violated contact protocols. She's not dangerous. She's Valari. She's a mother. That doesn't change the law." Draven stepped between them. "Then maybe the law is wrong." The silence that followed was deep, thick. Harrow's tone grew colder. "You've compromised mission integrity. You've shared resources, possibly intel. I saved a child. You crossed a line." "No," Draven said, louder now. "I finally saw the line, and I stepped over it because staying behind it meant pretending they don't matter." Norai's small voice broke the tension. "My mama sings when she's sad," he said, stepping forward. "Do your people sing?" Tallow blinked. Harrow didn't respond. Norai tilted his head. "If you sang more, maybe you wouldn't feel so tight inside." Draven nearly smiled. Sha'ai reached out and touched her son's shoulder. "Enough, love." But the boy turned to Harrow and added softly, "We're not trying to break things, just trying to be something." Harrow's jaw worked silently. Draven met his stare. "You can log your report. I won't lie. But if they ask me what I did, I'll say I stood with the ones who were worth standing for." Another long pause. Then without a word, Harrow turned and walked away. Tallow hesitated, glanced once more at Norre, then followed. When their footsteps faded, the swamp sighed. The tension lifted like steam after rain. Draven exhaled, hard. Shai stepped beside him, brushing his arm. "You didn't have to speak for us." "I didn't," Draven said. "I spoke for me." Norre slipped his hand into Draven's. "Did we win?" he asked. Draven looked down at him. "Not yet. But we didn't lose." Draven nodded. "That's right." The boy squeezed his hand. Shai stood on Draven's other side, silent, but something in her gaze had changed. Less guarded, less afraid, more open. Draven looked at them both. The swamp surrounded them, wild and alive and still uncertain, but it no longer felt like a place he'd escaped to. It felt like the place he'd found what mattered. He looked again at the stone Norai had given him, and for the first time in a long time his voice didn't shake. The wind came from the north that morning, cooler, sharper than the usual swamp heat, carrying the scent of mineral stone and something else beneath it. Change. Shai felt it before the birds quieted. Draven saw it in the way the mist didn't quite settle. And Norai, sensitive in the way only a child untouched by adult doubt could be, said it outright. "They're coming again," he whispered. Draven looked up from where he knelt, adjusting the moss netting around a fresh patch of hybrid roots. The boy stood barefoot just beyond the greenhouse threshold, holding a glowing bug in his cupped palms. His small face was pale green in the filtered light, eyes wide, not with fear exactly, but with recognition, a kind of quiet knowing. "Who's coming, little shadow?" Draven asked, keeping his voice light. Norai didn't answer at first. He simply opened his hands and let the insect fly upward, its glowing wings trailing sparks in the still air. Then softly, he said, "The ones who don't listen." Shai stepped forward from the trees behind them, silent as always. But this time, there was urgency in the set of her jaw, in the hard edge of her gaze. "They're on the eastern trail," she said, moving fast, 4, maybe 5. Draven stood. "Scouts?" "No," she replied, "not scouts, soldiers." A beat of stillness. Then he nodded once. "We'll meet them here." Shai frowned. "It's too exposed. We should run." "No," Draven said firmly. "If we run, it confirms everything they fear, that we're hiding something, that you're dangerous, that I'm guilty." "You are guilty," she said. "To them." Draven met her gaze. "Then let them hear the truth from my mouth." A silence passed between them, heavy, but not cold. Shai gave a tight nod. "Then I'll stand with you." Norre came closer, clutching his mother's hand. "Can I stand too?" Shai knelt and kissed his forehead. "You already are." They didn't wait long. Less than 10 minutes later, the brush at the far side of the grove rustled, parted, and 5 human figures stepped into view, geared in full colonial armor, weapons low but ready, visors down, eyes hidden behind mirrored glass. Draven recognized only 2 of them by build and gait. Lieutenant Harrow led the group, as expected. Still too clean for someone who spent time in the swamp. Still too upright, like the rules themselves were stitched into his uniform. Behind him, Private Tallow followed, eyes scanning the foliage. The boy looked more uncertain than before, more aware of where he stood. Draven stepped forward slowly, raising a hand in open welcome. "This is a research site," he called. "You're trespassing." Harrow didn't stop. "Dr. Ward, you've been flagged for a Category 2 contact violation. Unauthorized interaction with native species. Suspected harboring. Suspected rescue," Draven corrected. "Of a child. One I'd save again." The group slowed now, noticing Shai and Norre standing behind him. "This area was supposed to be restricted," Harrow said. "We were told the Valari had been relocated." "Relocated," Draven echoed. "You mean pushed out, displaced, ignored, but not gone." Another soldier raised a scanner. A soft chime beeped, echoing across the swamp. "2 Class B biologicals, human signature confirmed. No threat response detected," the soldier reported. Norre took a step forward. "I'm not a biological. I'm me." The men looked at him, startled. Harrow frowned. "It speaks English?" "He learned English," Draven said, "because I spoke to him like a person. Violation of communication protocol, one of the other soldiers murmured. Sha'ai stepped forward now, slowly, each footfall deliberate and grounded. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't plead. She simply said, "We are not enemies, but we remember the ones who treat us like shadows." Draven felt a pulse rise in his chest. This woman lost her mate in a mining collapse, caused by negligence, no apology, no recognition, just silence. And now her son was nearly lost to the same swamp your tech disrupted. And still, the only crime you care about is that I chose to help instead of look away. Tallow's helmet tilted slightly, uncertain. Harrow's voice was clipped. "We follow protocol for a reason." "Your protocol failed," Draven said, "so I stopped following it." A long silence fell between the two groups. And then, unexpectedly, Norre stepped forward again, lifting something small in his hands. "I brought you a gift," he said, walking toward Tallow, "in case your hands get too cold from holding rules." Tallow blinked. "What?" "It's a warm rock. It glows sometimes. It reminds me not to be mean when I'm scared." Tallow looked toward Harrow, who said nothing. Then hesitantly, the young soldier took the stone from Norre's hands. It glowed faintly in his palm. The other soldiers shifted, confused, waiting for a command. But Harrow didn't speak. He looked at Draven, then Sha'ai, then Norre. And then, wordlessly, he turned and walked back the way he came. The others followed, slowly, uncertainly, but they followed. Only Tallow hesitated, looking down at the glowing stone in his hand. "I don't know what this means," he said quietly to Draven. Draven nodded. "You will." Tallow gave a small nod in return, then disappeared into the mist. When the last footstep faded, the swamp exhaled. Draven turned to Sha'ai. "They'll report what they saw." "I know. You could still leave. Hide deeper." "No," she said. "This is our home. If they come again, they will have to face us as we are, not as shadows." Draven knelt and pulled Norre into his arms. "You were very brave," he said. "I was scared," Norre whispered. "That's how I know you're brave." The boy looked up at him. "Will they take you away?" Draven shook his head. "Not today." "Good," Norre said, "because I still haven't shown you my best bugs." Sha'ai laughed then, softly, freely. It was the first time he had heard her laugh like that. Not a smile, not a breath of amusement, a real unguarded sound. It wrapped around them like safety. Draven stood beside her, brushing her fingers with his. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They had weathered the test, and they had endured, together. The swamp was still watching, still wild, still ancient. But in its quiet places, it now carried the memory of resistance, and the beginning of something unbreakable. The storm passed quietly during the night, leaving behind a hush so complete it seemed sacred. Rain clung to the leaves in heavy drops, catching the dawn light like molten glass. The swamp shimmered with dew and memory. Draven stood beneath the old tree where the grove met the edge of the moss fields, his hands tucked into the sleeves of his weather-worn jacket. The wind pressed softly against him, cool and laced with the scent of wet bark, glowing fungi, and something fainter, like breath held too long and finally released. He hadn't slept, but it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like waiting. Footsteps approached behind him, soft, deliberate. He didn't turn around. He didn't have to. "I thought you might be here," Sha'ai said, her voice quiet but full. Draven smiled without facing her. "You always seemed to know." There was a pause. He heard her exhale slowly. "This place remembers things," she said. "Some spaces hold loss, others hold choice." He turned to her then. She stood beneath the draped roots, framed by the soft morning mist. Her hair was loose, falling in dark, damp waves down her back. Her skin, still glistening from the walk through the swamp, shimmered where the light touched her. The color of her tendrils had deepened to a soft violet, the hue she wore only when she was open, unafraid. Draven stepped closer. "And this space, what does it hold?" Sha'ai studied him for a moment. "Hope," she said, "for the first time in years." He hesitated, his voice lower now. "You're not afraid anymore?" "I am," she admitted, "but I'm not alone in it." Another step. They were close now, the morning mist rising around them in curls. Draven reached out slowly and brushed his fingers along her cheek. She didn't flinch. Her eyes fluttered shut for a breath. Her skin was warmer than he expected, soft with the faint pulse of her energy beneath. He could feel her heartbeat, not in her chest, but in her presence, her stillness. "I think I started falling the moment you stopped speaking," he murmured. "And I didn't know what it was until you looked at me like I mattered." Shai opened her eyes. "You do." The words settled between them like roots pressing into soil. He leaned in just slightly, slowly enough that she could pull away, enough that it remained a question until the last possible second, but she didn't move. And when their lips met, it wasn't a collision. It was a promise. It was slow, almost hesitant. Two people who had spent too long surviving, finally letting themselves feel something without fear of breaking. Her lips were soft, cool at first, then warm against his. Her tendrils shifted, brushing gently along his shoulder, curling ever so slightly into his hair, like they'd been waiting to touch him for far too long. She pulled back only enough to rest her forehead against his. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. Behind them, a small voice yawned. "I saw that," Noré called from beneath a nearby overhang of glowing moss. Draven turned, trying and failing to hide his smile. "Saw what?" "You kissed Mama." Shai raised an eyebrow. "Did you watch us?" "I was hiding," Noré replied proudly. "Like a spy, but a happy one." He came running over, carrying a woven satchel filled with hand-picked swamp berries. "I made breakfast," he declared, "but you have to eat it slow because some of them explode." Draven knelt and opened the bag. "Is this safe?" "Not really," Noré admitted, "but it's special." Shai sat beside them, her leg brushing gently against Draven's. They ate in peace, messily, laughing as one of the berries burst on Draven's shirt, staining it bright green. Noré squealed with delight and immediately declared it a fashion upgrade. Later, when the sun rose higher and light filtered down in warm gold, Shai led them to a new space she'd been shaping. Half grown from the trees, half constructed by hand, it was simple, an open shelter with a thatched roof and moss floor, ringed by stone and rooted plants. "It's not a home," she said. "Not yet, but maybe it could be." Draven walked through it slowly, running a hand along the living walls. "It already is." That afternoon, more Valari passed nearby. No words were exchanged, but a few nodded. One woman, old, eyes dark and lined with grief, hummed a tone Draven hadn't heard before. Shai responded with a low harmony. The song passed between them like water. He watched it all unfold. Quiet connection, quiet rebuilding. Not forgiveness, perhaps, but permission. Later still, as dusk fell, Noré curled up in the crook between them beneath a canopy of vines. His breathing slowed, and his words came softer, sleep tugging at the edges. "Are we a real family now?" he whispered. Shai looked at Draven. Draven reached out and smoothed the boy's hair. "Yes," he said. "The realest kind." Noré blinked. "Even though I have glow hands and weird dreams?" "Especially because of that." "And because I talk too much?" Shai smiled and kissed the top of his head. "You talk just enough." Noré yawned. "Okay, just checking." He fell asleep soon after, his hand curled in Draven's. The night wrapped around them. A breeze drifted through the clearing, carrying the scent of wet soil, flowering vines, and ashwood sap. The swamp, long feared and misunderstood, no longer felt like a boundary between worlds, but a bridge. Draven lay back, one arm tucked beneath his head, the other resting lightly on Shai's hand where it lay beside his. "I never thought I'd find peace on a world like this," he said. "You didn't find it," she whispered. "You helped build it." She leaned into him then, lips brushing his jaw, then his mouth again. Slow, sure, certain. No longer questioning. Just here, just together. And for the first time in a long, long life of silence, exile, and unanswered cries, Draven felt whole, not because he'd saved them, but because they had saved him too. 3 years later, the swamp had changed, not in the way settlers thought it might, but in the way time changes a melody. It had grown softer around the edges, richer with new voices, denser with stories whispered through vines and drifting pollen. Draven stood in the doorway of what had once been a lonely greenhouse, now entwined with roots, flowering branches, and woven cloth dyed in Valari colors. It wasn't a structure anymore. It was a home, a real one. Behind him, soft laughter echoed, Shai's voice mingling with two others. New voices, new Valari. The first families had come hesitantly at first, guided not by invitation but by curiosity. Word had spread quietly through the marshes and song routes. There is a place where a human listens and doesn't forget. Some didn't believe it, but some had nothing left to lose. They came one by one, a widow with 2 daughters, an old storyteller with ink-stained hands, a silent hunter who hadn't spoken since her brother died beneath human drills. Each brought something with them: grief, doubt, skill, language. And each, slowly over time, found room beside the others. Not without difficulty, not without ghosts, but they stayed. They built shelters not with blueprints but with memory. They sang in the mornings again. And at night, when mist curled like breath across the roots, they whispered the names of the ones they had lost, and the ones they were learning to love again. Draven helped where he could. He still worked the land, still studied flora, still cataloged the shifting bioluminescence of the swamp's rarest species. But most days, he simply listened. And on days like this, he watched the boy running barefoot through the clearing, his dark hair now longer, tied back the way his mother wore hers. His green skin shimmered in the light, his voice ringing out in both languages, human and Valari, as he taught 2 younger children how to make the bug lights dance in circles. "Not like that," Norai laughed. "You're too rough. You have to sing to them." He crouched beside the luminous moss and tapped the rhythm with his palm. The insects rose, responding to the familiar vibration, fluttering upward in a glowing spiral. The younger children gasped. Norai turned to them and grinned. "See? Easy. You just have to talk to them the way they want to be heard." He stood and dusted his hands off on his tunic. A moment later, he spotted Draven and sprinted toward him, not as clumsily as before, but still wild with energy. "You were watching again," Norai said, pointing an accusing and muddy finger. "I always do," Draven replied. "It's one of my many duties as your... What is it now? Guardian? Father? Teacher?" "All of them," Norai said proudly. "And also my bug namer-in-chief." An important title. Very. They walked side by side for a moment before Norai asked, "Do you think it matters?" Draven glanced at him. "What does?" "That I'm both." "You mean Valari and human?" Norai nodded. "Some of the new ones, they still look at me like I'm strange. Not bad strange, just like I'm made of 2 songs they don't know how to sing together." Draven placed a hand on his shoulder. "You are. And that's exactly what makes you matter more." Norai looked at the sky through the trees. "Do you think I'll have to choose someday?" "No," Draven said simply. "You'll be the bridge." They stood quietly for a moment, the sounds of evening swelling around them, songbirds, water dripping from high leaves, the soft hum of the insects responding to the rhythms Norai had taught them. Shai approached then, barefoot, her tendrils glowing soft amber. She slipped beside Draven and touched Norai's back with her hand.